I wanted to do a part 2 video on the dynamic withdrawal method. Bring everyone up to speed. We have the 4% rule, which says that you can take 4% out of a portfolio every year in retirement and never run out of money. I introduced something called the dynamic withdrawal method that basically determines what you take out of a retirement portfolio based on the market performance of that year. You can go back and look at part 1 of this video if you want more information and how that works. But bottom line, research shows that the dynamic method, often you can take more money in withdrawals with the dynamic method, and you have more money at the end of life with the dynamic method over the 4% rule. Go back and watch that video first, but I wanted to add more detail about the dynamic method and why it may be an appropriate method for someone or why not an appropriate method. This is not financial advice. Please don't interpret it as such. If you want more information on the dynamic method and if it's the right method for you, I strongly suggest meeting with a certified financial planner to take a look at your numbers and take a look at both the 4% and dynamic method and see what could work out over time for you. So the first thing I want to state about the dynamic method is exactly what I just said. It really should be done by a professional. 4% is pretty straightforward and you can DIY it yourself in retirement. But a dynamic method is more nuanced and really does require the professional skill and hand of a financial advisor. Why? There are certain factors in a year that have to be taken into consideration. Everything from taxes to inflation to different things. And you want to do that at the hand of a professional versus a DIY method. Someone asked me, like it, as myself as a financial advisor, when I retire, will I use dynamic or 4%? I don't know. There may be a new method available when I retire that may blow both the 4% and dynamic out of the water. But between the two, I probably will use the dynamic and I probably will manage it myself because I'm a financial professional and this is what I know how to do. But for people who are not financial professionals, I really strongly suggest you connect with a financial professional if you decide to follow the dynamic withdrawal method. The second thing, this is very important. You have to have resources to cover years when either you have very low returns or you have very negative returns. Years like 2008, if you go back to the first video, I couldn't take anything out of the portfolio. There was a year before 2008, there were 2 years in a row that I couldn't take anything out of the portfolio and the withdrawals were just zero. You have to be committed to not taking money out of the portfolio during down years or very low years. And this can be very difficult for most Americans because most Americans have a lot of their assets or even all of their assets in the retirement account and that's it. And they can't live 2 years without drawing income on that portfolio. This ties into a phenomenon I talked about on this channel called sequence of returns risk. Sequence of returns risk is basically that you have adverse market events very early on in your retirement experience that tanks the portfolio. And if you have 2 to 3 years of successive negative returns or very low returns, depending on your overall account values, it completely torpedoes your retirement projections and your retirement planning, and it can be very difficult to recover from that. It could also put you into a tailspin where you're going to run out of money in your mid to late 70s, whereas initially your projections showed that you had enough money to last into your 80s. So deciding not to withdraw money during down markets or during low markets protects you from sequence of returns risk and allows the portfolio to recover. And it makes a huge difference in overall portfolio performance and later performance in the portfolio during your later years. So you have to be committed to not taking money out of the portfolio during those periods of time, and you have to have other resources to draw on during those periods of time. So 4% rule. The 4% rule, it looks good on paper, but it oftentimes when people use the 4% rule, you'll see them 20 years later dying with double the money they initially started off. They're not taking out enough money from their portfolio to really make an appreciable difference. They really could have taken out that money earlier on in their retirement to enjoy it a bit more. Now they're like 95 in a nursing home, and now pretty much the nursing home is going to get it. The good thing about the dynamic portfolio withdrawals is that it allows you to customize your response to the market and what you take out and customize things to changing market conditions. So it can help you manage the amount of money in the portfolio And oftentimes people who use dynamic withdrawals end up taking out more money over a lifetime than the 4% rule, and often end up with larger balances at the end of life. How do they do that? Even though they take out more money, it's because they're avoiding adverse market events. They're not taking money out in a 2008. They're not taking money out in a 2022. They may not be taking money out during market years where they have low or no returns. They're letting their portfolio heal. And that is actually a very powerful thing to do in terms of longevity of the portfolio and balance of the portfolio long term. Everyone would love to protect against sequence of returns risk, but here's the reality. If you don't have a large cash pool or resources like a pension, rental income, something that is rock steady that can balance out your portfolio, you're going to have to subject yourself to sequence of return risk. I do have clients who have a year, in some extreme cases who may have up to 2 years of cash sitting in the money market. Most clients don't have that much in cash. Most clients don't want that much in cash because they see it as a missed opportunity to put it in the market. But I do have some clients that are extremely risk averse who sit on large cash piles because they're waiting for adverse market events. They do not want to take that money out during adverse market events. They want to go to their money market. Another benefit of the dynamic withdrawal strategy is that it keeps people really engaged in the retirement process and paying attention to their finances. 4% is a set it and forget it modality. You have the answer at the beginning of the year, you take out your 4% and you go on your merry way. But for people who use a more dynamic approach, you actually are paying attention to what is happening during the year. And for some of my clients who use a more dynamic approach at high markets, for example, we're in November, towards the end of October, we had a kind of a boom in AI and technology. And for my clients who had AI and technology stock, I called them and had conversation. And yeah, we sold some of that AI and technology stock at highs and harvested that through the year. If we had just taken a straight 4% in January, we wouldn't have had an opportunity to participate in that market upswing. Retirement becomes a living plan and it evolves as you do under a dynamic withdrawal strategy versus 4% set it and forget it. And for a lot of clients, I actually really like that because they have skin in the game and they're watching what's going on and asking questions and being very involved in the strategy. And I always like involved clients who are involved in the process. Next, you can spend more in the go-go years under dynamic. As I said, when I went back to my computer screen, and I forgot to do this, I wish I would have done this on screen because this is really powerful. If you look how much the individual spent between the ages of 65 and 95 under the 4% rule, they spent $675,000 out of the portfolio. If you look between the ages of 65 and 95, how much this person was able to spend under the dynamic plan, they spent just over 1.5 million. They spent a lot more under the dynamic plan than they did under the 4% rule. And a lot of that spending was able to occur during the first early years, which was very good for this person because these are the go-go years. If you look at retirement projection, we call it go-go years and no-go years. Go-go years are the time immediately after retirement. You retire at 65, you're in good health, you can still walk, you can get on a plane, you can go see friends, you can dine out, you can have all these fun times, and you have the time and the money to enjoy it. That typically lasts between 65 to 75, maybe 80 if you're lucky. And then there's the no-go years. For most people, that starts in early 80s, maybe late 70s, early 80s. And that's for the rest of life. You're not going to get on a 14-hour plane ride. Maybe going out to eat isn't quite as fun so much. Trips that you used to take all the time, maybe you'll take one trip a year and that's it. It's just things slow down and there's a dip in spending. And there's a ramp up again towards spending towards end of life, but that has to do with long-term care and nursing home and medical care expenses. But the dynamic withdrawal method allows you to take that into consideration. This person actually had a pretty good time in the between 65 and 75. And if they could swing those years where they couldn't take anything out of the portfolio, I'm sure they got in some pretty good trips and had a lot of fun. Versus the person who was following the 4% rule, praying they didn't run out of money, they were just basically living up against the box and really piecing together an existence that probably wasn't that fun. So the dynamic method can potentially give you more of an opportunity to live the retirement of your dreams when you are young and in the go-go years. Finally, you could end up with more money towards the end of life. Like I said, there's a huge difference in what both portfolios end up with. Between the 4% portfolio ends up with about $750,000, whereas the dynamic withdrawal method portfolio ended up with north of $2 million. Now, we have to remember this is 30 years on, so it has about half, maybe a little bit less of the purchasing power that money has today. But the dynamic withdrawal method gave this person more of a purse to deal with end of life long-term care issues, or if they have a next generation, to leave to the next generation. So that's another big benefit of the dynamic method. So I'm going to talk more about the dynamic method intermittently throughout my channel because I think it's a very interesting concept. But tell me what you think. Tell me what you like and what you don't like about the dynamic method. And if you have any questions or if you have any thoughts, leave them in the comments section. And if you found this information useful, please do share and subscribe.